Hello, Montana. I'm Daniel Larson, and I'm running for U.S. Senate. Trying to go around and capture what Montana voters truly care about so I can represent them when I get to the United States Senate. The theme of my campaign is STOP, which stands for See the Other Perspective. I want to do this campaign different. I want it to stay small. I want it to be focused on who I am as a person. If you have anything you're concerned about, reach out. Let's have a conversation. All right, hello. I'm Daniel Larson, running for U.S. Senate in the state of Montana. I'm here with Mitchell Locke. So I don't know if you want to do a brief introduction.
Sure. My name is Mitchell Locke. I am a cattle raiser in the Texas Panhandle, and I'm, I think, the fifth generation to be in this area, not on the exact same land, but be in this county, and I'm married with 2 kids.
Okay. And so I reached out to you. ABC had done a story. I guess Roberts County was the highest Trump voting district in the last election cycle. They did a profile on you. They spent a little bit of time with you, and then edited it down to a couple of different pieces. It seemed like you had a little bit more to say than what came across.
Yes, and I mean, I told them everything I thought that I wanted to say, but it's kind of the nature of the beast. They have to cut it down into manageable portions, but they omitted a lot of the things that I thought were important. So, but I mean, they didn't really misrepresent anything. It's just they chose what they wanted to show, which is fine. Yeah.
So it came across that you were concerned about the estate tax, as well as they caught you calling Trump a buffoon, I think is the word that you used at the time. Yeah. So the estate tax, there's been a little bit of progress since that interview with the, I think that it's now at 6 million. But we were talking earlier that there's just a fundamental understanding that people need to have about what estate taxes are doing to ranchers like yourself, forcing properties to be split up and just in order to pay the tax on the place, right?
Yes, it's really, in my opinion, it's just a redistribution scheme, because it destroys what families build for generations. Because the nature of agriculture is your assets are the land. And on paper, land is worth a lot of money, but the return on that land is not very much. So on paper, you might be worth $15 million, but the return on that $15 million is nowhere close to it. But that's what they tax you on. That's what that's the value that's taxed. And families do not have agricultural families, whether it's farming or ranching, don't have the cash to pay that and hold on to their business or their assets. They have to liquidate assets. And that brings in a lot of cash when you liquidate it, but then the business is gone.
Right. And it seems like within the tax policy, like the things like the estate tax are like well intended, but I don't think people understand how they're actually playing out. You know, there's a lot of gaming the system. When people actually have real assets, they're able to move into different trusts and stuff like that to avoid the gains tax on it. And then it leaves, people like yourself paying the burden of the, I guess, taxes in the United States. So people need to understand that it's really income taxes, and it's people like just regular transfers in the estate tax that are.
Yes. And there's entire businesses set up around protecting you from the estate tax. Yep. We have to deal with accountants. We have to pay life insurance, because that's one of the strategies, is to take out life insurance policies on the owner of the land. Say, in our case, it's my father. So we have to pay a lot of money in life insurance. So if he does die, we will have the money to pay the taxes without having to liquidate land. There's estate lawyers that we have to pay to try and deal with this tax. So before it even hits us, we have dealt with it and paid for it. I don't know how many times.
Right.
It's an ever-present force in the back of our heads. It's always there.
Yeah, so I was thinking something like an exemption for productive agricultural land, just uniformly across the board, would be a
And
good idea to.
I don't understand why that's never been brought up before. I've never thought of it before, but it seems to hit agricultural families the hardest.
Right, because there's no cash flow to pay the tax,
No.
and yeah. So
And say in our case, and I know this is other people's, we are still paying off the land from the last time we had to pay the estate tax. So we had to buy half of our land again. So on the same land, the same family is having to pay for almost half of it every generation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it used to be a lot worse. I know it affected a lot of Montana ranchers, like in the 90s, pretty bad, as far as the lot of places were split up for that. So maybe agriculture, but I think there's within the small business community too. There's some other family transfers that probably makes sense to eliminate from that tax base. I'd like to see us move to a different tax leg in this country anyway. Move to a value-added tax, which might help, and we could reduce the burden on income tax and estate taxes at the same time. But yeah, so maybe that would be something helpful. But you're sitting there as a cattle producer this year. Yeah, so the market's been pretty rough to you. Any thoughts on that?
It seems like I've been going to the store, and with all this panic buying that people have been doing, the meat section in our local grocery stores and our local Walmart, it's 30 miles away. The meat section has been almost sold out every time I've been there, whether it's chicken, pork, or beef. Why haven't the killer cattle prices reflected that?
Right.
Or let's say killer cow prices that is almost exclusively made into ground beef. The price has gone down. I don't understand how that happens when the demand is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And all the frozen beef that the packers hold on to has been used up.
Right.
Why is the price still going down?
Well, so yeah, I think what you're seeing is the I think you probably know some of the things. So the industry consolidations within the meat packers have just been brutal on the cattle industry for a while, and even the USMCA that they just got through didn't have a country of origin labeling on it, which I think would have been a substantial win for domestic beef production. So when you have companies like JBS consolidating the industry, and then they work both sides of the market when they're controlling the price of cattle. I think it's one of those things where unless there's a political will to go ahead and change this system, it'll probably be dominated that way for a long time. So,
and that's scary. We've in my family, we've talked about in the future, if my kids want to take over, there might not be that much left to take over because it'll be a vertical monopoly. Tyson or one of the other big packers will then own the land also, because all of these, along with the death tax, everybody's had to sell. Normal people can't buy the land, so who's going to? Maybe packers. And so then they'll own the land, they'll own the cattle, they'll own all the feedlots, and they'll own the packing houses.
Yep. And so unless something's done, I think there's some talk about setting up or they've requested the Justice Department to look into the price fixing in this recent one, but I have a fear that they're going to come back and be like, well, COVID-19 shut down our plant. Now we have all this inventory, and then they're going to buy cattle at the rock bottom price, and then continue to make record profits as they come out of it. And it will be brutal unless we do something substantial. And talking to the different organizations, though, it seems like the solutions are real simple. As far as I think we need to promote change some regulations to get some smaller packers online. But country of origin labeling, I think, is huge. Also, I think that there's a market out there. Traditionally, within the GOP, we don't talk about climate change that much, but I think the domestic supply chain for beef should be promoted certainly over Brazilian imports and Mexican imports. And there's a trade conversation to be had about, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, and Canada, where we have to give an advantage to our domestic production. But
I think you're absolutely right. However you can push our product, and I'm not saying that you're being the climate change thing isn't valid, but that will appeal to a wider audience. It can show people that American beef is the best way to go for America,
right,
for different reasons.
Yeah, and I think that's a way more responsible model than just saying, all beef is bad and we need to start, switching to, being vegetarians or something to save the earth. So I think first we need to realize that there's already some wins to have in the conversation. But
and I'm encouraged by you talking about this, because it seems like there's little to no politicians at the federal level or in my case at the state level that are talking about this.
Yeah.
It's just never brought up, and it's frustrating when it seems like the little guy does not have a voice in all this. And so it's encouraging to hear you talking about it, and knowing that it's on some people's minds that might be able to make some change.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do something pretty substantial here, and you might not like what I have to say next. What if I told you that in order to get the political power to change, like the consolidations and start to give the advantage back to some small consumers, I would have to bring some Democrats along with me?
However it needs to be done, I don't want to give up that much to the left.
Right. I think it's the power bases on both sides need to be addressed. Is that okay?
Yes, I'm absolutely for that. I'm not saying screw the left. If you have to find a way to appeal to the left, though, and the climate change thing is I think that's a really good way to do it. You have to have everybody working together, and if you don't, to make permanent good changes, you have to have both sides working together.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about it because I'm looking at how these different candidates are financed throughout the nation, and I'm looking at different people, and it might mean that we have to have some Republicans vote for Democrats that are, because if we did that, we could take out Nancy Pelosi in California. We could take out, a lot of these voices that are taking some of this money and creating the trade conversation that's a disadvantage to people like yourself. And there's Republicans taking this money too. So
yeah, I'm not a partisan, and I try not to be anyway. And if there's a Republican that I see that is doing things against my beliefs or morals, they do not align with what I think, and I won't vote for them.
So, what are your current thoughts on the president then?
The ABC interview made it sound like I didn't like him at all. I still don't really like him that much personally. I think he has been effective so far. I like a lot of his policy decisions. And if that continues, if he would get off Twitter and just make policy decisions, I would be fine with it. And I'm going to vote for him again. I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. And that's the problem with the modern American left. There's no blue dog Democrats left. It's all about identity politics. It's all about, things like that. And one of my biggest complaints with the modern left is they have abandoned the American taxpayer in favor of globalism. And I'm not a hardcore nationalist. I understand the need for cooperation on a global stage, but to completely abandon the American taxpayer and the American middle class, which is the majority of American taxpayers, is crazy to me. And so I do not align with them at all. There's very few that I can find that I can actually say, hey, he's got some points I agree with, some that I don't.
So I think the Democratic establishment has a lot of problems. And we could talk all day probably on that. But so I think the way I see it is the establishments on both sides, the Republican and the Democratic establishment, have been so influenced by money that they're no longer representing the people,
Absolutely.
It's not getting through. So I think that I'm trying to bring a wave to Washington that would actually be some more voices of the people. And it might mean that I have to encourage a few Republicans to vote on the other side of the ticket to try to get some things done. And then a few Democrats to vote for Republicans as well. But I think if we all realize that, like, even if we look at presidential politics, it's like it shows up every single time. It's like, well, how is it that in this election cycle, you start off with 20 people and you end up with Joe Biden? It's crazy, So it's like there were some more reasonable voices in the conversation at one point.
There were some guys. I wouldn't have voted for any of the candidates on the left, but there were some that I agreed with a few of their policy positions, and they were not. I thought that, like Tulsi Gabbard, she was a rational, sane person who I didn't agree with her on everything, but I could relate to her on a few things. She never got a chance, and I probably wouldn't have ended up voting for her in the long run. But you don't see those types of people very much on the left anymore.
Yeah,
well, they're there, but they have no voice.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, when they look at the Trump vote, they don't see that there was a lot of people that just wanted to blow up the establishment, and they think that, it's a sign of something, terrible or super right. But I think that when you're given a choice between Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, a lot of people are saying, yeah, Trump makes sense, So, but so as a person that's willing to continue to support the president, are you okay if I go to the U.S. Senate to try to be a guardrail for this president? Absolutely.
There is good Trump and there is bad Trump. If he's doing something that you as an elected official are representing your constituents, and if he is doing something that you think goes against the benefit of the best thing for your constituents, that's your job, is to be a guardrail. And it might be something I disagree with, and I see what you're doing, and I say, well, I'm with the president on this, but it's not about it's about what you are doing for Montana,
right?
And in my state, it would be about what my representatives are doing.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about your senators in the Trump era?
I'm okay with them so far. I was a Ted Cruz guy from the start of the election, and I had to get behind Trump slowly but surely. The left also kind of put me behind Trump. I didn't really want to defend him, and they constantly made me defend him. And but yeah, I was a Ted Cruz guy, so I've always liked him. I think that they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I never quite got the Cruz thing until I started looking at how different candidates are financed, and I got to say that he's respectable when it comes to the money that he takes. As far as he's kind of supported more by the people than he is by corporations. So.
And that's something I wish was brought more out into the light, is where a lot of this money comes from. And I know it's there, but the average person isn't going to go digging to find out these connections and what these organizations are that donate to these campaigns, or after the campaign's over, where the money's coming from. And it's hard for the normal person to follow those trails.
Yeah. Well, I think I can create some easy ways to do it. Some of the better ideas are to create NASCAR jackets, like an infographic where the labels are proportionate to the amount of money you're getting.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
And they have to wear it on the Senate floor or the House floor. I think that's good.
Yeah. And then I think I can actually create a list of everybody taking money from JBS and the other meat packers, if you're interested in knowing that.
That'd be interesting. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah. So going a little bit deeper. Yeah. So you actually, in your area, there's a lot of oil and gas industry as well that's been affected. You want to talk about that a little bit?
And I don't know how. I want American energy independence, and I don't know how that's possible as just someone on the outside looking in. I'm in agriculture, even though there's a lot of energy production around us. I'm not directly involved with it, but I don't know how America gains energy independence with Saudi Arabia and Russia controlling so much of the world's oil. But if we could work towards that, even if it's incremental steps, so that things that are happening now can't or won't affect America's energy sector like it has.
Yeah. So I think that within that value-added tax that I was telling you about, I think we could strategically disadvantage Saudi oil and Russian energy just with the promotion of the domestic supply first. I think this is also a climate change conversation as well, because if we're saying that, for example, if you buy domestic oil, you're exempt from this value-added tax, when you go to refine it, but the second you try to buy it from Saudi Arabia or Canada or something like that, and then different types of oil have different energy profiles. So if we were to educate consumers at the same time, it'd be good. But it looks like there's a lot of infrastructure already developed in Texas that they're kind of shuttering right now, right?
Yes, they're shutting down. They're shutting down a lot of it. I have a lot of friends and family that are in the oil business. My wife worked HR for an oil field supply company and she was furloughed a few weeks ago. And they're shutting down wells left and right. There is absolutely no new drilling. There's not going to be any for the foreseeable future. And a lot of people in this area, and I know it's a lot of different areas, the oil production is the main source of income. It's the main employer. And so when it starts to shut down, it is devastating.
Right.
And yeah, the gas might be lower at the pump, but a lot of people are hurting because of it.
So we've got to protect domestic oil production, and so there was a lot of volatility within the energy sector that they weren't talking about either before this. I mean, it's happening at the same time that the COVID-19 happened, but a lot of these energy companies were way overextended before this happened, and Saudi Arabia kind of took advantage of that and threw some low prices in there to get the competition out. So I think that, I mean, we're talking about foreign policy at this point. That is a strategic move to disadvantage our industry, which should come with some repercussions. At least monetary.
I think so too. To Russia also, and I agree with you. I thought that from the beginning, that they are actively trying to hurt American industry by doing this.
Yeah. So generally, you've got sort of mixed feeling on economic development from the energy sector, or
as long as it pays for itself, I'm for it. I don't want subsidies. We have, not only do we have oil production, the wind turbines have become a big deal around here, and while the government subsidies are there, they make people a lot of money. The second the subsidies are gone, they can't even pay for themselves. Those turbines, the turbine. I don't know if this is true by the numbers, but from anecdotal evidence, if the government subsidies weren't there, the turbines in this area would never pay for themselves. And so, if that's completely accurate, I don't understand why we're doing that. Because if we're completely paying for an entire energy sector, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so I think with some of it, though, you're getting some other economic benefits and some offsets within different industries. But definitely, it sounds like, okay, so it sounds like you're mirroring a lot of what the people around here say, is just generally they don't want a subsidy for their cattle price. They just want a fair price. They don't want a subsidy for the energy that they're producing. They just want to install the smartest option. So it's not sustainable over time if the government has to prop it up, is what you're saying.
Well, it's okay. We get cheaper energy that we're paying extra for because we're subsidizing it. So in the end, it's kind of it's a wash.
Yeah,
it's just like with the subsidy that the administration, is not just the administration, but the federal government just gave everybody. Yeah, a lot of people got checks, but why did they why did they take that money from us in the first place? I mean, I could have kept that money. And
oh, that's what you're saying, is just let me hold on to my money.
Just let me hold on to my money, and I think I know what to do with my money pretty well.
Well, if you're looking, but I would just say if you're looking to restart the money, or the economy, the money directly to the people is the most effective way to do it. I have a huge issue with the rest of the $2 trillion and where it went.
Yes.
You know, it's 900 pages of slush fund is what that one was. But.
And I agree with you. It hurts me a little bit that happened.
Yeah, well, especially if they're telling you that, you know, that you still are going to owe all of these taxes, and then this is how they use your money. So I think there definitely needs to be more accountability for what the government gets done with the money that we're giving them.
Well, I know this is not on the same scale, even remotely, but I am on the city council here in our small local town. When we deal with tax money, I consider that money sacred, because that money was taken from people who worked for it.
Right.
And maybe they could have done something that they wanted to with that money, but we took it. So we have to consider that money sacred. Mm-hmm. I don't think the federal government considers tax money sacred.
No.
I think they consider it a piggy bank that they can reach their hand into, and the more they can get, the better. And I wish that the federal government would look at tax money the same way that I do in my tiny town's city council meetings.
Well, and I've heard the same thing from like Montana state legislators. There's one guy that I would love to kind of use as a role model for how I would legislate at the federal level. You know, he's talking about the same thing. He's on the appropriations committee. And, you know, on the other side of it too is, you know, like if the government's spending $1, you know, that first 10 cents is lost to some sort of inefficiency. And then there's another 40 cents that's just kind of in the administration of things. And so I think really understanding like how effective each dollar is mm-hmm. something that we definitely need to keep in the conversation.
Absolutely. And it seems like it comes and goes. That conversation happens sometimes, but then it goes away a lot. And I think that should be one of the most important conversations the federal government has day in and day out, is how they are spending Americans' money.
Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be on cronyism. It shouldn't be on, you know, special projects just for your own political gain. It should be, mm-hmm. you know, directly benefiting the people for the things that we agree we can actually do a good job at. You know? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a very good call out. And I think that city governments have a lot of wisdom that could be taken to the national arena as well. Maybe you should run.
I think I've said too much in public already. I don't know if I'll be able to.
I don't know. I think there's a constituency for stuff like that nowadays.
There probably will be.
So if I win, you're gonna come in the next cycle, right?
And join Absolutely. Me I'll start small. Be a county commissioner. How about we do that?
Oh, you're just gonna ladder step all the way up. Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe 10.
County sheriff after that.
Sheriff, and then so maybe 15 years we'll get you out there.
Yeah.
So in District 13, who are you comfortable with your Congress choices for Congress there?
Yes, they've been around. So yeah, because we have two right now that I think are taking over Mac Thornberry's spot. Is that right? I can't remember.
Yeah, Matt, so he chose not to run again, and you have Ronnie Jackson and a newcomer, right?
Yes, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but he is he's talking about some of these cattle issues also, these cattle price issues, and so I'm more encouraged about him than the other candidates, simply because he's talking about things that affect this area more so. Mm-hmm. Because even though we have a moderately sized city of 185,000 people that are close to here, but the entire surrounding area that he will represent is agriculture. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of these politicians in our area will just focus on the one population center and forget about all these other small counties. And it's nice to hear someone talking about this the things that affect really the main economic producer in the area instead of just the population.
So if Trump swoops in and he gives the nod to Ronnie Jackson, are you still?
The Trump's endorsement won't change my mind.
Doesn't mean anything? You mean it doesn't have political clout? It's more about the quality of what they're doing?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
That's more theater to me. It's fun to watch, but it's all theater.
Yeah. I think people don't understand how much theater is actually. I mean, it's crazy what goes out there. You know, even everything that people say is just a bit of theater. You know,
it is. And even Trump, people saying, "Well, Trump's being real." That's theater also. It's just a kind of theater we haven't seen anytime recently in American politics.
Yeah, I think people feel comfortable because he feels like somebody they know, or you know,
Absolutely.
no matter what's on his head, he's going to get it out in front of you so you can kind of judge it. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to cover while we're here, since you've got a super voice at this point?
No, really our big issues in my area, and I know they are for Montana, is cattle prices, agricultural issues with tax, cattle prices, and energy issues, things with the oil prices. And
so, what do you think about regenerative farming and agriculture?
Explain that to me.
So right now, like within the carbon sequestration market, different companies are paying carbon capture credits, I guess is what it is. And so there's a model of like beef production where you go, you develop your irrigation infrastructure a little bit and you go high intensity, sort of in a paddock model. I don't know if it'll work with the type of land you got out there compared to water.
We are very rough. There's nowhere to put any sort of irrigation systems. If it works for some people, great. To make it a blanket policy.
Oh, no, that wouldn't make it a blanket policy, but currently we've cut back the spending in like our local resource offices, you know, so like if you wanted to do a project like this, you probably couldn't schedule an engineer, you know, and there's cost share programs out there that are available for
Hey, if it's effective for the producer, I say try anything. I mean, don't be stagnant. Always try new things. Don't go crazy with that, but I mean, we have to grow as an industry. We have to change, and it's if we're going to survive long term, we have to start trying some different things.
Yeah, and I think that it is some of the blocking and tackling, just going, you know, country of origin labeling, trying to produce some models that allow you to sell directly to the consumer a little bit better.
I'm shocked that we don't have country of origin labeling on our food products. That is shocking to me, with the amount of labeling that we have that is required now by the FDA, but we don't have to have an origin label. I think that's telling. Yeah,
it tells you about the political power of the people that don't want it to happen. So it's substantial because it's an easy win, I think. But I got to bring some. I've got to bring some other voices with me. So
I hope you can. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having this conversation with me, man.
That's no problem. I appreciate you actually listening to some of these people that I know feel voiceless.
Yeah. It's been too long, and they've got too much out in the wind here. So maybe we can do something.
I hope so.
Substantial shortly. All right, man.
What does it mean to be a Democrat or Republican anymore?
Thank you.
Who knows? I do know what it means to be establishment or anti-establishment, and definitely I'm anti-establishment. So keep paying attention, keep listening. We'll see if we can do this together. I'm Daniel Larson. Thanks for listening.